If you recall keyboarding class, or maybe if you've been around a little bit longer, you remember basic typing class, we know that in document layout, we're never supposed to let just one line of a paragraph either fall at the bottom of one page or the beginning of the next. There should always be at least two lines on either end when a paragraph has to break across pages. In typography, this is called widow and orphan control. Now there is some disagreement or some, debate over which one is which. But I'm going to use the definition that I'm used to, which is also the one that the Chicago Manual of Style uses. It says the single line that flows over to the next page is the widow, and the single line that falls at the bottom of the page by itself is the orphan. There's actually a little mnemonic, there's several of them, but one that I like that says, an orphan is left behind, whereas a widow must go on alone. Maybe that'll help you remember which one is which. But other than for that background and a little bit of banter, we really don't care which one is which when using Word, because we either allow them or we don't, unlike some other programs that let us designate them differently. According to almost every reputable style manual or guideline, we do not want to allow either in our documents. If we're in the paragraph dialog box and we go to the line and page break tabs, this is where we can find the widow and orphan control option. And as I said, it's either on or off. It's really nothing fancy. By default, widow and orphan control is enabled in your normal template. It's only under certain circumstances that you would want to come in here and remove the check mark, therefore turning it off and allowing those paragraphs to break, leaving only one line at the bottom or top of the pages. In addition to widow and orphan control, though, we see some other checkboxes that we need to discuss as well. They are keep with next, keep lines together, and page break before. Let's go ahead and use these, starting off with keep with next. Let's go ahead and close this dialog for just a moment. And let's scroll down a little bit in our document. Now this document does not have a lot of formatting in it yet, but eventually what we see as we get near the bottom of the page is an entry for business concept. It's kind of at the bottom of page 2. This is ultimately going to be a heading, and what we also don't want, in addition to widows and orphans, is a title falling at the bottom of the page with not even a little bit of the following content going along with it. That would be a bad thing, and it just kind of looks funny. So instead, this is where we're going to use this feature. Notice that this is a paragraph, and we want to say that this paragraph should always go with at least the initial couple of lines of the following paragraph. We'll go into our dialog box, and we'll simply check Keep with Next. Keep with Next refers to the paragraph following the currently selected paragraph. Then we'll go ahead and we'll say OK. Now let's scroll way back up to page 1, our cover page, where we had a little bit of information about our address, our P.O. box, our address, our phone number, and our web address. Remember that we used soft returns, so we're talking about this entire paragraph. We don't ever want this to break apart. In other words, this block should always be a block on one page. Just like we did before, we can go into our advanced dialog box, the line and page breaks tab, and in this case we can say keep these lines together. This setting has to do with the lines within the same paragraph. Now this is similar to widow and orphan control, but what this is saying is the entire paragraph needs to fit onto the page, whereas widow and orphan control is only talking about leaving at least two lines on one page or the next. We'll go ahead and say OK to that, and we'll take a look at one more setting that we have. Ultimately, we're going to insert a table of contents for this document, and then we're going to have our executive summary. Well, we want to make sure that our executive summary falls at the very top of the page. So we might select this paragraph, click on the dialog box launcher, and use the last in this series of check marks that says make sure you put a page break before. Regardless of where this particular paragraph falls, we always want it to be the first paragraph on a page. When we come down and say OK to that, we of course can see that it did exactly what we were hoping it would do. It has forced that down to what is now the top of page 3. Another thing that we notice while we're looking at this is it happens to have a first line indent, which just isn't going to be appropriate. So let's go ahead and drag the little ruler indicator over and make that flush left so it looks a little bit more appropriate for what will eventually be a title. All of these features are collectively known as pagination tools. What we find is that those who don't know how to use these spend a lot of time adding manual hard returns and page breaks to force text to the desired positions in the document. While I've found that we never get 100% away from adding our own manually, knowing how to use these features automates the process, not only saving us time initially, but greatly simplifying editing and making our documents more consistent. Since if we implement pagination manually and then make edits to our document, we'll constantly need to remember to go back in and check and remove things that we did manually that aren't important anymore. We always want to automate and let Word do the work for us when we can, and this is a perfect place to let it do its thing, using pagination control.